The information shared on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. While we discuss topics related to mental health, well-being, and emotional support, we are not providing therapy or medical services. Always seek the advice of your physician, psychologist, psychiatrist, or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a mental health condition. If you are in crisis, feeling unsafe, or need immediate support, please contact a mental health professional or emergency services in your area. The views expressed by guests and hosts are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of any affiliated organizations or institutions.
Get inspired, get motivated with M.A.Y.A and the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find M.A.Y.A on Twitter and Instagram at M.A.Y.A_Akai. On Facebook at M.A.Y.A Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything M.A.Y.A at M.A.Y.A_Akai.com.
Of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and I'm quite loving this one. What's love got to do with it if it doesn't have self-love in the mix? And boy, do we have something to talk about as it is Valentine's Day. What a perfect topic to have. So, of course, you know, the reason I pick a topic like this is because I want to say that I try to create a very safe space that we can have conversations, very salient topics about mental wellness. Because a lot of times, mental wellness talk, mental health talk is very stagnant. And I try to bring things to the table with a fresh and forward thinking kind of perspective, because the focus of my podcast is to pull back that veil of self-doubt and sabotage that so many of us have in our lives that keep us from being the best version of ourselves. So here I want to help you to identify your ambitions and harness that motivation to help you to get that satisfaction that you seek in your everyday life. So with that being said, if you are a first-time listener or viewer, I always say just buckle up for safety. Just because it could be an occasionally unexpected ride. Something might be said that makes you go, and that's why we're here. But of course, if you are a returning listener or viewer, of course, always love your support. Welcome back. In fact, I am so happy to say that the podcast is growing and our international audience is fantastic. You know, thank you to my listeners from the Middle East, from Singapore, from Japan, Tanzania. It's all over the place. And I'm happy to say if I'm sharing something that has a global impact, more power to it. But before we jump into this episode, remember, if you've missed any of the other episodes, don't panic. Just make sure you subscribe and share my YouTube channel. It's M.A.Y.A Speaks to You, and you'll always be notified when a new episode is coming up. As well as, if you just listen to the episodes, you can always find them on pretty much every podcast platform. You can go to Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify, whatever the podcast platform is, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be there. Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Of course, if you just get social with me, that's an easy way to keep in touch. You can always find me at Facebook, Instagram, X, and of course, YouTube at M.A.Y.A Speaks to You, all of the same handles for everything. And of course, don't be shy. Subscribe and share my Facebook page. It's a great thing, but the website is even better. So if you go to M.A.Y.A-speaks.com, all things M.A.Y.A is there. So you can find, obviously, the podcast. I am now writing articles. You'll find the articles that I'm writing there as well. As well as there's 2 things I'm super proud of on that website. I have a blog, and the blog is a menopause blog. That is me on pause, on words, which brings up salient topics about perimenopause and menopause that a lot of them don't know. And I want to make sure I educate you as the world is throwing so many things at you about going through the menopausal transition. So check in. It's Wednesday. Once a week, I post something. The other piece is my inspirational blog. I give you 1 thought a week I really want you to chew on and process and kind of see where you can either employ or remove something from your life based on what talks about. So make sure you check out my website, M.A.Y.A Speaks. Of course, you can always make things really simple. See, I'm elevating as I go along. You can always download my app. I have created an app, the M.A.Y.A experience, which has all things M.A.Y.A right there, literally in the palm of your hands. You cannot go wrong with that. So if you download the app, there you go. Everything from my blogs to the articles, obviously to the podcast to listen or watch is right there. So it makes everything simple. So I would say if you want to just have everything M.A.Y.A on the go ahead and download the actual app, the M.A.Y.A experience. You can scan the QR code here for the Apple Store. And if you're an Android user, you can scan also here and get the app in the Amazon store. Eventually, I will get it to the Google Play Store, but right now, just available in 2 pieces that you can download. I will also share these QR codes a bit later that you can scan and get the app to go as well. And there you go right there, because we know we are so attached to our phones, literally. To be honest, everything I said, just getting the app might be the simple and easiest thing for you to do at this point. Either way, I appreciate however you support M.A.Y.A. M.A.Y.A likes it. All right, so let's jump into this episode that I am actually really excited about. But remember, we always have a toolbox moment. So what's our toolbox time? It's, of course, we're going to always use our emotional intelligence when we listen to the M.A.Y.A podcast, which we know your emotional intelligence is that ability to manage both your own emotions, but also understand the emotions of other people around you. Because what is balance if you only understand you and no one else? So emotional intelligence looks to create balance on both sides. So when we have our toolbox moments, it's very much for this reason. So we always put something into the toolbox. That is the other piece that's important. So what's going into the M.A.Y.A toolbox this week? Love. Imagine that. We're putting love in the toolbox. It should have always have been there. But in this case, when we talk about love, we're talking more about self-love. It is actually, unfortunately, I feel like the one love that often isn't discussed enough with people until maybe they're in dire straits or they're struggling or, they sit in therapy. And just like that, the understanding of the importance of self-love in your relationships seems to bring on a new life. Well, we're going to dig deeper in today. So what is love? We got to start with that, because if we're putting something in the toolbox, the question is, what is love? So love, by, I would say, a Webster's definition, is a multifaceted concept that spans not just the idea of emotion and mental spaces, but it also can be looked at as having biological as well as philosophical and cultural type expressions to it. And everybody has heard love spoke about in a very probably broad way. So let's talk a bit about when I say, okay, so what is love? Because there's different types of love. It's not one size fits all for every type of relationship that you have. So for those people who are probably familiar with the types of loves, because let's say the ancient Greek philosophers really laid the foundation for us to kind of get an understanding for the distinct type of loves or forms of loves that can help us differentiate how we move with our partners in different relationships and friends and our family. So most people know Eros, which is romantic, passionate love. So that's a love that you're going to have with your partner, your dating, your spouse, whatever it is. That is a romantic love. Then there is philia, which is more of the love that's tied to your friendship. That's about deep friendships, and brother love would be a way that it might be classified. And then, of course, you have agape, which right now we need a lot more agape in the world, because it feels like it's missing right now. Because agape refers to that selfless love, unconditional love for humanity. And often agape can be referred to as divine. So a love for the divine as well. So agape is a word that we often probably have all heard at some point of time. So those are the 4 types of loves that most people are probably familiar with. But there is that 5th type of love that is the most important love of them all, the greatest love of all. Whitney Houston and some others have said about that. But Aristotle in his writings talked about philautia, and philautia is divided into 2 distinct types of self-love. There's a healthy self-love where it's characterized by when you are self-respecting, you employ self-care, you are a positive self-image of yourself. So you view yourself in a positive light, and you're always looking to elevate under good conditions and positivity, often with keeping the other 4 loves within your wheelhouse. Because the most important love you have is self-love. And I also tell people in therapy repeatedly, the most important relationship you have is that relationship with yourself. And part of the reason most people struggle, I'll be flat out honest, or even end up in therapy is because they are loving something else or someone else often more than they love themselves. And that realization happens almost every time when people are in therapy. The decisions that they have made have never been good for them. Now, on the flip side of that, there is also unhealthy self love. And the trending and buzzword that you hear about most of the time is narcissism. So, unhealthy self love is associated with narcissism, vanity, and egoism. Well, this version of itself involves when people are very like self obsessed, they prioritize everything about them, what they can gain, what makes them happy, what brings them pleasure, and often at the expense of others. So, understand when we talk about self love, it is a two-dimensional thing. So, as we're putting this in our toolbox, I want you to do some deep reflection. You go stand in the mirror and think about what I just said. Is your, philatia, are you a self-love that's healthy and positive? Or are you a self-love that's negative because you are narcissistic, vain, and have a lot of ego? Chances are, if you are the unhealthy self-love, you're not going to see it, because most people who are narcissistic don't see error in how they think and feel. They feel they have a right to prioritize themselves over others. And that's a dangerous perspective or lens to look through. Hence, somebody else who may or may not end up in therapy. And I'll tell you the truth, I probably see far fewer people in therapy that are narcissistic and have unhealthy self-love. And I see more people who don't love themselves enough. To be honest, narcissists don't land on my couch too often. But the invitation's always open if you're looking for some self-growth, if you identify. So some reflection, get that mirror and ask yourself, do I truly love myself? Do I respect myself? Do I care for myself? Do I have a positive self-image? And if you're not saying yes to all three, you got some work to do, because that should be an emphatic yes to all three. If you say one or two, okay, still got some work to do, but at least you're standing on something and here. So that's good. All right. So we talked about the 4 types of love when we talk about what is love. They're all equally as important and have a purpose in your life. But believe it or not, there even is a little more depth to the idea of love, because there can be psychological aspects to it as well as biological. So I'm going to get a little scientific on you, because you may say, okay, that makes sense. But I want you to fully understand the power that is love. It isn't just this word or idea. It is something that you live, feel consistently, even when you don't realize it. You are probably utilizing some form of love to some degree. But when we talk about that, let's say philosophical kind of angle or even psychological, because philosophical and psychological can go hand in hand. So when we break it down that way, there was a psychologist by the name of Robert Sternberg, I think his name was, who said that love is kind of a triangular theory, that it exists with 3 dimensions that are important for it to feel cohesive. You have the 3 pillars, which is intimacy, which is closeness. And I always challenge people to step back from the word intimacy, because often people assume that intimacy means sexual encounter. It can. But intimacy could also be something emotionally and mentally we are connected, and it's a very close connection that we have. So intimacy is closeness. Then passion, and that's often the physical attraction piece. Yes, people, if you're talking about eros, that romantic love, there is a spot for passion or physical attraction. People struggle with this because often people will feel guilty if, let's say, they lead with more passion in their relationships and love than they do other things. But if that's a priority someone has, it's important to understand that for you as well as the person that you are with. But we'll dive into that a little bit later. That third component that Steinberg talked about was commitment. When people decide that they want a closeness and they want the passion or that physical attraction, they may determine to make a commitment, a decision to stay together. So Steinberg said these were the 3 dimensions of the psychological piece when you think about love. Then there's that biological drive that kind of goes into the equation as well. And this was kind of fleshed out more by Helen Fisher, who was an anthropologist. And what she talked about was that love is really something that's instinctive. It's our mammalian nature. It's like talking about that reptilian brain, they say, that still nestles really deep inside your brain. But she talks about that love is very mammalian. It's a very natural and instinctive drive that we have. And she says you can look at it almost like hunger. how love is. And I'll be honest, if you think about what people do for love, it's probably not wrong to say that it does have sometimes insatiable type of need for some people. So she described it as it can be a hunger. And she goes, and that hunger within your brain biologically exists in three domains. She talks about there's lust. So lust feeds into that part of us that's very estrogen and testosterone based. Whereas attraction is a dopamine serotonin piece. And then you have the attachment, which is that oxytocin and vasopressin. That when those endorphins are created, touch, hugs, kisses, it creates a sense of warmth. So there's a biological component to love as well. So something that seems so simple, as you can see, is very complex. And what we do with that complexity often determines where we stand within our own happiness with ourselves, but also the relationships in our lives. So when we jump into this episode, because now we know what we're putting into our toolbox, and probably didn't realize how robust love really can be. So as we talk about, we're putting love in our toolbox, right? Well, then what becomes the objectives for this episode? So there are specific, like very specific things within this episode that we are going to discuss. One, I want you to understand the foundation of relationships with others as well as with yourself. Two, how to identify and, more importantly, manage boundaries so that love makes sense and is positive versus toxic and dysfunctional. Next, we have pretty much incorporating healing and wholeness into how you approach how you love yourself and others. And then lastly, we're going to talk about breaking cycles, because realistically, a lot of people struggle in their relationships with others as well as themselves because you have been perpetuating a cycle that was probably a learned behavior. A lot of the things you do in life are learned behaviors. I hate to be Freudian, but if it's right, it's right. Our childhood experience imprints upon us very strongly. And we often carry many things forward, including how we love ourselves and others, without ever thinking twice if it makes sense, because we emulate or scaffold, we mirror what we've learned. Well, once you become an adult and you become a decision maker and the architect of your present, which can build your future, you don't have to love the way that someone taught you to love. You can begin to love the way that makes sense to you and aligns with you emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, hell, financially. Because for some people, there's even a place for that. So either way, it's making a shift so that the way you're loving you and the people in your life makes sense to you and not just other people. So we're going to start with talking about the foundation of relationships, including the relationship you have with yourself, because it is the most important. I cannot stress to you how much I say this within therapy to people. If you are not good with you, you will not be good with anybody else. And people struggle with that until they're not good. And then everybody wants to come to therapy because nobody wants to do the work to not get to therapy, because it's about honesty and trust and respect of self. And a lot of people truly struggle with that piece. So when we talk about what are those foundations of relationships, I'm going to posit at this point that the way you treat and value yourself sets the standards for how others will treat you. I also say this repeatedly in therapy to people. You did not come with a manual. You need to teach people how to treat you and how to love you. So when you just go along with what people do for you, and if you don't like it and you don't bother to correct them, they're going to believe that what they're doing is okay. So I always say this to people. If you're jumping bad and puffy with somebody because you felt like they didn't love you the way you wanted to be loved, my first question is, did you tell them? Did you teach them? Did you give them any inkling about what they were doing maybe wasn't working for you? And most people honestly say they haven't, that they just go along with things and change things along the way. So we teach people how to treat us and how to love us. But the key thing about that is without self-love. Now, I always say, if you're a returning listener or viewer, or you grab that paper and pen and you're jotting some stuff down, because this is important right here. Without self-love, you will find yourself settling for less than you deserve. You will be seeking external validation to fill your internal voids. Think on that for a minute. Chew on that. I'll say it again. You teach people how to treat you, how to value you, and how to love you. You set the standards. And when you fail to set the standards, you get what people give you. And generally speaking, people give you what they think you have or what they want you to have. It really all just depends. It all just depends. So there is no manual, as I said, that came with you. And actually, one of the projects that I'm working on is helping people to begin to create a manual about themselves. It's part about self-discovery. It's about self-love and unpacking all the things that maybe they don't understand about themselves. Hence, they're not in good relationships. They're not being loved the way they should. They don't love themselves the way they should. And the project I'm working on is creating the manual that is you. Now, you'll never have to hand it to somebody if you don't want to, but at least you'll be working from a position of understanding what you need to be happy in your relationships, rather it's family relationships, rather it's romantic relationships, your friendships, whatever it is, work relationships, to be able to maximize those experiences to get what you need from them. That's what the manual is going to do. I want people to begin to learn how to love with caution and curiosity versus reservation and skepticism. And the reason I say that is because I so often or hear people say, there's no good people out there today. Everybody is bad. This, and this. That's not going into the realm of dating, or even if you think that way in your own relationship, with caution and curiosity. Because there is a place for these things. And I always tell people that when you do the work to process where you have gone wrong in past relationships, not repeat the same mistakes, and that includes the relationship you have with yourself, you'll stop making those same mistakes, and you'll make a shift that makes more sense for you. So you can be cautious when you meet someone and you're in a relationship, because your past experiences are not to be tossed away, but they are not to lead as you move into a new relationship. So you use your past experiences as your caution, the caution of the things that don't make you happy or minimize you or you struggled with. That's where the caution is. And then you go in with curiosity. You go in with an open mind that this person is not that person. So I'm getting to know them and learning them, opposed to assuming the generalization is that all men are the same, all women are the same. And I caution people all the time, stop generalizing, because I am not you, you are not me. And it's clearly an insult when you try to impose upon someone values that do not resonate with who they are based on your experiences. So this is why it's important to learn to be cautious, curious, versus reserved and skeptical. And if you are reserved and skeptical, I would tell you, you probably should not be in a relationship with anybody else, and you should not be dating. You should be focusing on the relationship with you. So if you are dating, I want to ask you some questions. Why are you dating if you really believe there's no good people out there? And if you're in a relationship and you believe there are no good people out there, then why are you in a relationship? Just food for thought. Foundational things. Chew on it. Learning how to be cautious yet curious with love, because you have done the work on you enough to know what self-love looks like. Hence, I understand what I need from a potential partner. Okay, so some foundations of relationships. You now understand where self-love should play into this. So let's talk about setting boundaries. What does that look like in this case? So setting boundaries is truly about self-love, because it includes automatically by default self-respect. So self-respect in any relationship you have, including the one with you, has to be a non-negotiable standard, because self-respect empowers you to establish healthy boundaries, ensuring that respect is both given and received in your relationships. But in order to set those boundaries, what becomes important is that you have to know your needs, your wants. More importantly, what are your deal breakers in a potential relationship? And by the way, these things apply to eros, romantic relationships, and your friendships, your work relationships. You have to know what you need from those relationships, what you want to see happen, and what's the deal breaker that you determine at some point, this is not a good fit for me. because I understand there are things crossing my boundaries. The key thing about boundaries is this, and this is the takeaway for this particular setting boundaries piece. You may not know, you may not fully know the person that you are in a relationship with, a dating, because it takes time to know each other. And realistically, with all you young folks, what you talk about is, you start dating somebody and, the representative shows up, which are us old folks say, putting your best foot forward. You like to, and that's what you would expect in a relationship with somebody when you're getting to know them. You want them to show up to be their best selves. I mean, you probably wouldn't be happy if you saw somebody come to a date with you and let's just say, lady, you're on a date, whoever, and he comes in and his shirt's wrinkled and got, food stains on it. You'd be like, wow, I wasn't enough for you to actually want to, look at your appearance and come looking your best. So we do want to put our best foot forward when we're in relationships, but that's about sustainability that people have to understand. So the key thing is, if you can't consistently be that person that you're presenting, stop being that person. Be you. Now, it doesn't mean you don't lead with kindness and generosity, but you should be putting forth that person that you can be consistent and sustain who you are within that relationship. So the key thing is that you're not going to fully always know the person that you just started dating. You can be in a relationship and you get to know more about your partner as you grow. There's some things that you should know in regards to where the rubber meets the road, what you have in common. Do you have shared values? Do you communicate well? All these kind of different things you should have an understanding of as you're getting to grow and learn with this person. But the more important thing about setting boundaries are, you may not know 100% your partner or the situation, but you should know you. Because when you know you, the boundaries become clear about what you will not tolerate and what's not acceptable to you. Because you love yourself enough to know when something doesn't work. Hence the reason this episode is called What Love Got to Do With It if Self-Love Isn't in the Mix. Because if you are engaging in any relationship or situation and you're not leading with self-love and you are leading with the happiness and comfortability of others, this might explain why you've never truly been happy in relationships, because you've never ever put yourself first. You've never understood what you needed happy in that space with anybody. Doesn't matter who it is. So you may accept things in your friendships that you don't like. You may accept things at your job that you don't like. You may accept things from your family that makes you cringe. You may get pissed off at your partner. But the bottom line is that if you don't understand where you draw the line in a stand where someone has done too much, you'll accept anything. And that usually equates to unhappiness. So the key thing about setting those boundaries is when you know you understand where limits are. But if you don't know you actually don't know what limits to set, which means you may be the recipient of so many things that you do not desire in your life. So that's why setting boundaries is important, and where self-love comes into setting those boundaries. You know you, so you know what doesn't work for you and what does, and that's how you move within your relationship. So this all then kind of moves up and elevates into the idea of healing and wholeness. Because often when we do the work to figure out who we are and we begin to love ourselves, that's called healing and not dealing. Most people spend a lot of their lives dealing with situations and cards they've been dealt versus throwing those cards back and say, I need something new or different. You can work your cards to a degree, but at some point, if you keep playing the same game, you got to ask yourself, how much sense does this make? I'm dealing with my life and circumstances that people have given me. And if you keep staying in negative and toxic situations, and every time you try to convince yourself why you're staying, if it's always for someone else, your self-love meter is real low. Now, we can make compromises and sacrifices, and in times it does make sense. But if you're always making sacrifice and accommodations to others and you feel left out in the cold, it's because you don't love yourself enough to tell yourself, this isn't working for us. And clearly, I don't feel we've got reciprocity here. I feel like I'm giving and you're taking, but I'm not getting anything back. I want to give you a really truth about relationships. Balance is very arbitrary. You're never going to be in a relationship where everything always seems perfectly equal. It might be a little disjointed here and there, and that's okay. What you don't want is when the imbalance is really obvious and it puts you at a clear disadvantage. When you keep accepting disadvantage in your relationships, it's because you don't love yourself enough to say, this doesn't work for me. You're a very nice person. I enjoy certain things, but you've crossed some boundaries and I don't care for this. When you begin to heal, you will not just accept things because you stop dealing with circumstances and situations what people give you. So when we talk about this, I want to emphasize that personal fulfillment and that sense of wholeness should come from within rather than expecting others to complete you. Oh my gosh, everyone, as much as we love Jerry Maguire with Tom Cruise, oh, we love that scene where he says to Renee Zellweger, oh my God, you complete me. And I'm like, sound good. It was a great line that we all know. But if you're in a relationship because you think someone is completing you, we got a problem. Because you should not be looking to fill your internal deficits from the outside. You need to understand why you have the internal deficits that need to be filled, and then you figure out how to fill them. Don't look for other people to become your problem solver or to become the buffer, because then it turns into what they might be filling in your void may not be exactly what you need. So wholeness should come from within rather than expecting a partner to complete you. This internal strength then allows for you to be more authentic and resilient in your connections. So if someone is completing you, I'm going to ask you that question. What part of yourself have you left unknown and not attended to yourself? Because no one should complete you. And a lot of people tend to think that way. It's just not a healthy way to think. So then that brings us into the fourth dimension of what self-love in your relationship should look like. And that's breaking cycles. And boy, I'm going to tell you, cycles exist in almost everyone's lives. There's generational patterns of behavior that's been passed down from parents and from their parents, grandparents. And a lot of people keep pulling a lot of unhealthy habits forward because it's what they learned. And I mean, I'm not talking about just how people love. I'm talking about how people maybe reconcile their finances, all kinds of things. They just interact in ways with people that may not be authentic with them. They're just pretty much projecting a learned behavior. And they've never stopped to think about, does this really make sense what I'm doing? Is this good for me? Is this healthy? And that's where, when you love yourself, you start to inventory morals, your values, your past experiences, your upbringings, and you may find that you have grown away, that those things never, or maybe don't resonate with you anymore. They may have never have resonated with you, but you won't know it until you love yourself enough to be honest and do the reflection. So, understanding the importance of resilience and perseverance during difficult times is paramount because it's so easy to want to fold. If you want to stop those patterns of toxic or dysfunctional relationships, it requires you to have courage to prioritize your own well-being and dignity. This is where people struggle, especially when faced with unhealthy dynamics. It's key that as you start to begin your journey in self-love, that you know the difference between compromise, which is about things that are fair, and balance as much as possible in difficult situations. So you and that person can come to a fair and balanced place that works for both of you. Versus, have you spent your entire life capitulating? And capitulating is when you surrender, you give up, you get no resistance, and you yield to whatever somebody else wants from you. And I'll be honest, we have probably learned to capitulate more in our lives under the guise that we were compromising. Now chew on that one for a while, because most people are like, do I capitulate? I was compromising. Take a situation in inventory and ask yourself, was the outcome of that situation with you and another person fair and mutual, that you could agree on something that you were disagreeing on and find balance that could work for both of you? Or was it more so the other person got what they wanted? You just said, okay, you know what? I'm not going to die on this hill. I'll just let it be. That's you capitulating. Often people who don't like confrontation or fail to have a voice or who do not know how to advocate for themselves capitulate a lot because it's what they have come to know. And it's often, I hate to say this, very learned behavior. Something else, when we talk about breaking cycles that a lot of people don't know they struggle with, I want you to think about, I want you to reflect on your dependency in your relationships. Are you afraid to be alone? Do you settle because you feel happiness comes from the outside instead of from within you? And if you find that you really struggle to be alone, that's because you haven't done enough self-love. Because often being alone is where you find peace, you can grow because you removed yourself from things that are toxic or things that are not good for you. Or maybe there's nothing for you. So why insert yourself in situations for the sake of just not being alone? And many people will insert themselves in situations that they shouldn't be just for the sake of not being alone. Okay, we've covered a lot. We talked about the 4 things that are important when you're developing your own, I would say, plans, your architect of self-love. We know that you have to understand the foundation of relationships, identify and manage boundaries, make sure you incorporate healing and wholeness into what you do with self-love. And lastly, understand what cycles that you might need to break because you haven't been loving you because you've been taught that loving others was more important than loving you. That thought, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to break down how to manage your self-love because it isn't easy, everything that I just said. So I'm going to something that you want, think about, and then you can start that journey. And if you think you might be interested, it's a you owner manual. You might want to shoot me an email and say, hey, Maya, I think when you get that project going, I might like to use that manual because I think I'm struggling with figuring out what self-love is and where to start. And if this little manual is going to help me to begin to understand how to love me so I can teach others how to love me, it's worth the time and effort. All right, everybody, let's just take a really quick break. We'll be back and we're going to talk about how to begin that journey to manage your self-love.
Stepping out of bed. It's easy to take for granted. You work, eat, play, sleep, and get out of bed the next morning. Seems simple. But if you're one of 25 million individuals in the United States living with major depression, sleep isn't always so easy. Neither is navigating your daily life, free of guilt or hopelessness, or having the ability to enjoy time out with friends, make simple decisions, enjoy hobbies, or go to work. Major depression is the leading cause of disability across the United States, and without treatment, the frequency and severity of symptoms tend to increase over time. However, there is hope. Major depression is treatable, and there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Today, there are a variety of treatment options to choose from. The key is to get an evaluation and find a treatment plan that is right for you. Free education, information, and support programs are available. You are not alone. We can help.
You may not realize it, but these words, often used to describe someone with a mental health condition, can be very harmful. In a country where 1 in 5 people are affected by a mental health condition, it's time for all of us to step up and change the conversation. Just because someone's struggle isn't obvious on the outside doesn't mean they aren't hurting on the inside. We need to see the person, not the condition. Join with me, pledge to be stigma-free.
Whether it's our stories, the warmth of our laugh, or our family's secret sauce, we all bring something different to the table. So make some space. The power of connection is waiting right outside your comfort zone. Learn how you can help strengthen your community at belongingbeginswithus.org/teamup.
I debate all day. It's what I do. But there are some things that are undebatable, like your mental health, my own mental health. I was in a dark place when my brother passed away in a car accident. I've never been more devastated than the day I lost my mom. I was depressed, miserable, in ways I never imagined. I reached out, and my sisters came, my pastor, my therapist. They helped me get through it. I found that the more I spoke up, the healthier my mind became. The chaos that was in me began to subside. I was more focused, clear. When you love your mind, you can go so much further. That's not up for debate. Find mental health resources at loveyourmindtoday.org.
All right, everybody. Nice message about some mental health stuff to keep things in front of people. That mental wellness is no different than anything else. Just like if you've got diabetes, cardiac issues, it's an organ in your body that struggles, and your brain is an organ like everything else. But it doesn't get as much grace and kindness for some reason. It's just looked at in a very stigmatized way. And all those messages are about one, helping you to understand that it's a health issue like anything else, but also how it's stigmatized and how it makes it difficult for people to move forward. With that said, we're on the other side of the break now. This is episode 88. What's love got to do with it? If self-love is missing in the mix. And that's the key thing. If you're loving without truly loving yourself, the experience may not be everything it should be for you. And I hate to say this, maybe even for the person that you're with, because you're limiting the experience because you don't love yourself enough to put forward the thing that could make that relationship so much richer for you, but also for your partner. So we're going to talk about, as we wrap up the show, how to manage your self-love efforts, because that's the part that can be difficult. How do I start with this? What do I do? Because a lot of times, let's be honest, we're not taught how to love ourselves. We are taught how to love others. So this is now something that a lot of people are stepping into a realm that they've never explored or never been taught or given tools. Well, this is what M.A.Y.A is all about. My ambition is your ambition. If you want to love yourself more, I want to help you to get those tools to be able to get to that spot. So let's talk about a couple things that are the takeaways that I want you to start to process when you start this self-love journey. Either you're going to kick up the speed and momentum that you love yourself, or maybe you're just starting on that path. It doesn't matter what, but as long as you're on it, that's what's important. So one, I need to understand the difference between complacency versus being content in your relationship, whether it be outside of yourself or within yourself. Complacency happens when people don't want to leave their comfort zones. It means that the convenience, the comfort, the consistency, and the control is working for them, and they don't want to budge, they don't want to move, but they are not happy. That is complacency. And you can be complacent with yourself in a relationship versus being content, which often people can confuse for complacency. It just means, though I may have all those things I discussed, feeling comfortable, having consistency, control, and convenience in my life, I'm good because I've done this work to get to where I am. And at this moment in time, this works for me because not only do I have those things, but I have a connection to my life. See, that's the C that makes content matter versus being complacent. I have a connection to myself and the world I have chose to be around me. And I'm happy in that space. That's the difference. So know if you're being complacent with yourself or if you're content and how you love yourself. Two, what is your idea of change? This conversation happens a lot, and I've actually really heard people try to spin a wheel on this one. There is no changing anyone in a relationship. When people say things like, if that person loves you, they'll change. Maybe they might change something about themselves, but ask yourself, if I got to change to be in love with you, if I can't be me, is this the right place for me? And if you got to change to be with me, I mean, I'm talking about big sweeping changes, not small things. Because like I remember I talked about compromise, right? Versus, yes, I talked about compromise versus capitulating. So we are often going to maybe modify the way we move in our relationships. But if you find yourself having to change a lot about yourself to be in a relationship with someone, that's probably not the relationship you're meant to be in. And if you love yourself, you'll know enough to say, I'm not doing all that to with you. There's no guarantee it's even going to work. But if you can't love me for me and how I am, then who are you in love with? That's the other thing about love. Sometimes you have to inventory in your relationships, whether it's with you or someone else. Are you in love with the idea of you or the idea of that person versus the actual person? And that part that people struggle with. And that means you're loving honestly because you're not settling. So be careful with the idea of change when you talk about love, because you shouldn't have to make big sweeping changes to be with someone and vice versa. That often means that you are not a fit if you're doing that much rearranging to make it. Your life is not furniture. So be careful how you move things around to accommodate others for their comfort, especially if there's no comfort for you. So that honesty part. and being authentic in your relationship. There is only one you. Don't compare yourself to someone or try to be something that you are not. Love you for you. And that fits right into the change conversation. Because if you can't love you for you, how do you expect anybody else actually would? Because maybe when you are not you within your relationships and you're not loving yourself and projecting what you need, who do they fall in love with? And often relationship hit those bumpy roads when a person wakes up and has an epiphany that they're not happy or they're not getting what they need, because all of a sudden they begin to love themselves. In essence, true self-love, and this is what people often will struggle with, is not a shallow indulgence, and it's clearly not a luxury that's reserved for the privileged. Everybody has a right to have self-love, to feel respected, their worth, their value. And no one gets to question that, or even more importantly, determine that for you. Self-love helps you to do that for yourself. So it is radically necessary to consistently and deliberately to prioritize the preservation of your self-connection to experience life. Here's what's key: through your lens versus someone else's. And when you have self-love, you're going to look through life through your lens, but still be able to love others. Because I always say, when you're good from within, the without always benefits. It's when you're not, and you have deficits because you don't love yourself, that relationships seem very difficult and often tenuous. All right, everybody. This has been episode 88 of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition Edition. What's love got to do with it if self-love is mixing in the mix? Couldn't have said it more than that. So with that being said, I'm always thankful for everyone for tuning into the episodes. Like I said, the whole purpose of my podcast is to help you to identify your ambitions, harness that motivation, to help you to acquire the success and satisfaction you seek in your everyday life. That's what it's about. Because remember, little things get big things. And people always think big and think they forget the small things are the building blocks. They are the rungs in the ladder that move you up, that allow you to get to where you're trying to be. So it's okay to think big, but don't discount small. With that being said, remember, if you've missed any episode, in fact, I'm going to say this also is a companion episode to like 2 weeks ago about self-preservation. Because if you go back and listen to episode, I believe it was 86, it gives some good foundational things. And then I think episode 85 was about the economy itself. All these things are building blocks. And I've been giving you tools. And if you've been listening to those episodes, you could do a quick reboot to yourself and say, I wasn't thinking that way. I didn't realize I was doing those things. So you can check out other episodes I have all over the place. So you can find episodes on Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Audibles. Pretty much, if there's a podcast platform, you can find me there. Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Of course, you can listen to episodes on my website. Just go to maya-speaks.com. I would ask you to also subscribe and share my website, just like I'm going to ask you to subscribe and share my YouTube channel. Because, of course, if you like and subscribe these things, you'll get the alerts when a new episode is coming up and be ready to go, and you don't have to worry about that. Of course, if you keep social with me, all things M.A.Y.A is there as well. I'm always posting things inspirational and trying to give people more tools to manage in their lives. So make sure you follow me on Facebook, IG, and X at M.A.Y.A Speaks to You, as well as, of course, I said the website is all things M.A.Y.A. So make sure when you go to my website, you check out two things. My Me on Pause, my menopause blog, which gives pertinent and key information about going through perimenopause and menopause for women, as well as be some nuggets for you as well to learn something about your partner that might be going through that transition that can be a lot more heavier than most people realize. And then also, I have an inspirational blog. Both of these things actually get posted at least once a week on Wednesdays. I'm not trying to inundate you with a ton of information, just enough to get you where you need to be. But after I just told you all these ways that you can connect with me and stay connected and find out what's going on, you know what? There's actually just one more easier way to do that. You can actually just get M.A.Y.A on the go, which is the My Experience app, which you can find in the Apple Store if you are an iPhone user. You can scan this QR code. Or if you happen to be an Android individual, right now you can find this app in the Amazon store. Just scan these QR codes, or you can just go to either one of these places, the Apple Store or Amazon Store, where you find the podcast, and just search the My Experience, and you can download from there. So just in case you can't scan this for some reason, you can always go to either Apple Store, Amazon Store, search it, and there I am. And then pretty much you've got me in the palm of your hands, everything from podcasts to the blogs. And by the way, I will now be leveling up a bit for 2026, and I will be writing articles. I've paired with a magazine called Brains. And so I will be sharing an article like once a month at least about something that has a mental health focus to it. So a new part that will be going onto the website as well as the app is the blog posts are going to be more article based. So that'll be a new dimension. So hence what more reason to take Maya on the go is that you can always stay abreast of everything that is going on. Okay, everyone. Until next time. And I so enjoy saying this to people because it legitimately matters to me that people find happiness. I will tell you, as I am one of those people that legitimately, I love my job. I love when people are happy. And I even love when people have to say goodbye to me. It might be sad, but that means you're going forth to do the thing that you came to therapy for, or maybe listen to the podcast for, which is to be happy. And I just want to see more happy faces and people in the world. So until next time, everyone, remember, your present becomes your past. Thus, your future is no more. So make the most of every day because it's worth it. Everyone, be well, stay safe, and of course, continue to be absolutely amazing as you are now about to embark upon your self-love journey. Ciao.
Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.